So here's Vlad, one of his illustrations here. I went through and kind of chose a font that I thought would look cool called Creatures. That was just a random title I picked to go with his picture here, his concept art. I'm going to start with this concept art, and I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks I did with it. Okay, so I'm going to turn this eyeball off. So here's what Vlad made. He gave me this sheet that he sketched it out on. I wanted to isolate the creature here. There's lots of ways in other tutorials I've done to show you how to isolate this and select it, but there's a super powerful new feature in Photoshop to select something very quickly thanks to artificial intelligence. So if I go to select and I go to subject, watch what happens. The AI picks the I've never seen anything. I didn't think this was humanly possible. This is ridiculous. That was like 2 seconds, click, and it picked it. That's better than the magic wand. It's better than the quick selection. I hardly use those if you're using selections. This and the pen tool I use all the time. So now I just copy and paste. I'm going to go Command or Control C, Command or Control V, and I copied and pasted that into its own layer. There you go. Another design trend that's really popular is gradients, using like a gradient background or painting with gradients. I can go more in depth about how to do that later. But for now, right here, I just make a blank layer, go over to my gradients tab, go up here, and now they've got this gradient editor that's really powerful in Photoshop. You can start with a kind of like swatch that they've already given you. Go here, go OK, then I just click the gradient and pull it, and then I've got the gradient in there. If I wanted to do another gradient, I could go click this, and then I could go and customize my gradient here, double click the color, and start tinting it. And I can go along, click this thing here, and add other gradient points, and add other colors to the gradient. If I add a point here, change this color here quickly, and I hate that color, I just click and drag that off, and that's done. Click and drag that, and there's my new gradient. So you got choices, right? I'm going to go with the first gradient I made, so I'm going to delete that. What I'm first going to do is clean up the edges here because the subject select didn't do everything perfectly. So what I can then do is just go in to the magic wand area and just click these areas, see if this does it, and then Control X or Command X and can just remove those. That'll do it quite quickly, right? So I could go around here and clean that up. Another way to clean stuff up very quickly, go to the erase tool here, make sure your opacity is at 100, so I could go and clean that up. But there you go. So now I've cleaned that edge up and that creature is now selected. The other thing I'm going to recommend that you do when you isolate your creature is turn this into a smart object. All you need to know is when you convert something to a smart object is it keeps the resolution and keeps the quality of the image. If I was to modify this just as a layer, it will degrade the resolution and degrade the image. So if I right click, I convert to smart object. Any filter I throw on here, I can modify and it will continue. I can continue to edit afterwards. So let me demo this. So I converted that to a smart object. I want to tint this guy here to the gradient that I've selected. Here is a tip for that. I'm going to go down to this layers styles area right here. And I'm going to add a gradient overlay. Your gradient overlay may have defaulted to normal and a opacity of 100. So if the blend mode's at normal, I recommend either overlay or soft light. So the overlay looks kind of cool right now. You could go and lower this opacity, and you could also change the angle of that, and then that will tint it very quickly. There's other ways of tinting, but that's the one I'm going to demo for today. Layer style gradient, overlay, blend mode, overlay, or soft light, reduce the opacity, and then you can tint that quickly into your background. The other thing I'm going to highlight is if I wanted to change body position of my character very quickly. Like I've drawn it, I don't want to redraw it, but I want that neck extended or arm extended. What do I do in Photoshop? Again, for this, it's very important that you convert it to the smart object. You don't do it on a regular image layer. Edit, Puppet Warp, an amazing tool that will save you time. So Puppet Warp, and now I just go and I randomly click areas on here. I'm going to do a couple pins. I'm adding pins. Now I can go and I can extend that neck and actually change the body position of it slightly. So if I wanted to change the leg position, add a pin here, you can change that leg position if you want to. And then you just click on another thing, click on a tool over here, hit apply, and it's done. Because I converted this into a smart object, you can see the puppet warp is down in here. At any time I can click on it again down here and modify it at any point. Whereas if it was a regular layer, it would just lock that in and I couldn't modify it and edit it after. That's why smart object is important. I can also click this eyeball off and eyeball on. So I can turn it off. I can see what it looked like before. I can see what it looked like after. So for you character designers out there, if you've done up a character and now you have it in Photoshop and you wish the arm was tweaked like up a little bit or the head was over a little bit, you can use the puppet warp to do some subtle little gesture changes to it without having to redraw it. So that's how I made this gradient here before class. And then there's the guy there, and you can see the gradient overlay I attached there was much more subtle than the one I did this morning. And then there's my puppet warp that I made on this one. And at any time, just to demo that, I could double click on the puppet warp and change that position. So if you've done a series of characters, here's an offshoot for you. You could be doing character design, but you could also making book covers, posters, or game cards of your characters. So then you could go over here, go into the text area right here, going to click the text and then C1. There's my C1. There's my character 1. Highlight this font, make it bigger if I need to, 200. That's how you increase font size. There you go. And then you can go and you can pick another font and everything. So there you go. Look at that card design done in like 5 minutes. Threw a gradient on, threw some text on, did a gradient overlay to tint this creature with the gradient that I so chose, and changed body position all within 5 minutes. That's the power of Photoshop. So if I go back over here and I wanted to lay this out, if I wanted to be more mindful, like let's say I want to be a character designer, but well, like what tips could you give me for like properly laying out a book cover? What tips and tricks do you use? I'm a big fan of using something called guides. So I would go over here, go to the move tool. You'll see there's this ruler. Click and drag this down, and then you can create these invisible things called guides. So basically, if I was to print this book off, if I was to go to a printer's going to crop areas, right? So then I'll know safe areas to put your text in. Just come over here to the rulers, grab and make some guides roughly this far apart from your edge. So you're not putting the text too close to your edge. And then just go, and then you can make 4 guides and just throw them roughly around there. And then I would tell you, don't put any text. The fatal mistake people make when they're designing album art or book cover or a card is they're like, hey, my text looks really great here. Don't do that. Keep it right about there. That's a safe area to keep your text, okay? Also, phones and different screens will crop things off differently, so it's not just for printing. So I think the text looks good there because it's against something dark. I don't think it looks good there. Obviously, you can eyeball that. Let's say you wanted the text up here in a dark area. And so basically what you want to do is you want to add to the canvas size. So I'm going to add to the canvas size. You go to Image, Canvas Size right here. And this is where you can add to the overall, like if you want to put a frame on it. I'm going to change this to inches. So I could go and add 17 on this side and 21 on this side. And then you see it puts a frame around the whole thing. I'm going to undo that because I want to add just to the canvas to up here. Here's how I do that. Canvas size. I'm going to click the button here. So now it's just adding to the height here, right? So if I click in the middle, it adds a frame around it. If I clicked over here, it's going to add stuff to this side here, right? Right now, I just want to add to the top part. I think in inches, so I'm going to change that to inches. I'm going to change the height now to 23. And now it's added a section to the top here that I could take my text and move that up into here. I want to change that color quickly. I'd make a blank layer. I'd go to the marquee tool right here quickly. You could do it with shapes if you want, but I just do it this way. I'm liking the black. You could change the foreground color to anything you want, but I like the black. I'm going to click and hold the gradient, and under there is the paint bucket. Fill that in. Say if I made my marquee and it wasn't big enough, I need to scale this over. I hit Command or Control T. There you go. So if you're scaling something, scaling a shape, it's under Edit. The long way to do it is under Edit. Transform, there's all your stuff there. Or Command or Control T is the shortcut, which is what I use there. Canvas size that I made is too big up here, so I want to crop that down. Here's the crop tool. Move that down there, right click, crop. The last thing I'm going to show you in here is, let's say I use the original image that Vlad sent me. So if I want now to make this like 8.5 by 11, if I want to actually set a proper size to something, I would go File, New, and here you have all this stuff up here. I usually just recommend go to Print, make a letter size 8.5 by 11, then you can take it to Staples, print it off, or make it legal 8.5 by 14. These are all standard sizes you can send to Staples. They're not custom sizes that you're going to cost you more money. So I'm going to go 8.5 by 11, create that. It opens up this, right? So I've got this new document. So I'm going to go to this document. Photoshop docks things up here. I'm just going to click this off over here. There you go. I'm going to click all these off. I'm going to minimize this guy. And there's my document. So if I click them off, here's how I can make sure that this is an 8.5 by 11 size. I'm going to shift select all my layers here and drag them over here. And there it is. Now if I want to, I have them all shift. I'm going to shift select all these layers, Command T to scale that up, and just scale it up into the 8.5 by 11 sheet. Enter. My book cover is done now, and I can send this document to Staples to be printed.